Hello everyone, Clack of the Geek here, and welcome to another missing episode animation review from Doctor Who. Today we're going to be looking at the recently released Evil of the Daleks animation, and this is a story that I've been so looking forward to, because if you recall my missing episode prediction video and like what I wanted next, which has now reached 1k views, thank you, but I said that Evil of the Daleks was the story that I most wanted animated, and it was announced like in July, so woohoo! So, just like with the Faceless Ones and Fear from the Deep videos, we're going to be discussing the animation first and then the story. So, let's get into it. So, let's talk about the animation. Now, I won't lie, going into it, obviously I was very excited, but slightly nervous as well, because obviously I had very high expectations, and if it disappointed, it would be very disappointing, wouldn't it? Because it's the one that I wanted the most. And you know, recently the animations have kind of been on a bit of a downward trend. Like, Macra Terror was phenomenal in 2019. Macra Terror was phenomenal, and I might review that at some point, but yeah, that was phenomenal. Then we had the Faceless Ones in 2020, which was also fantastic, but just a little bit of a step down, but not massively. Then we had Fear from the Deep also in 2020, which was significantly a step down. It was still good, but it was definitely a step down, and the less said about the recent Web of Fear, the better. That's 25 minutes well spent. Now where's my Malibu? However, I can confidently say that this animation did not disappoint in the slightest, and I probably would have to say it's the best animation that we've had. I know that's what I say about most of the new releases, but with this one I think it's very much true. It is absolutely phenomenal. The character models are great. They do look slightly different from some of the other animations, but I still think that for the most part they are really well done. And I think some of them, like Trout, I think he has improved since some of the other ones like Faceless Ones and Fury. I think, you know, the other characters, I think they all look good. I also think the sets and stuff look fantastic, whether it's the 1960s present day kind of stuff, whether it's the Victorian house stuff, and especially when you see Scar at the end, like the exterior, when it's all the red and you see the outside of the city, it looks beautiful, and the inside of it with all the interiors and the Emperor's room, and it's just phenomenally good. I also think the action really is well done, and it's really well staged and really well animated for the limitations. For instance, in part 4, I think, or part 5, there's a sword fight between Jamie and Arthur, one of the other characters, and it's done incredibly well for the limitations that they have. And as well as that, the Dalek action in episode 7 with the massive battle in the throne room and all the different Daleks fighting each other. I've always known about this scene, you know, I've seen little clips of it that exist, little stills, and you know, it's like the final end of the Daleks. I've always wanted to see it, and I know some people say, you know, obviously some things are best left in your imagination, but this honestly did not disappoint, because it was like being a kid again, drawing these, because I remember doing an animation of this, like a little drawing animation of this years ago, and it was an absolute feast for the eyes, and it was just phenomenally good and absolutely perfect. I just want to say, the animation team, you have knocked out of the park. The Daleks are easily the best part of the animation in my opinion, and another thing as well, I've always been, in terms of the animations, a bit of a prune to it being in colour, because I've always wanted it to be as accurate to the original as possible. But with this one, I chose to, you know, watch the colour version, and I think it really does help it. You know, you've got certain sets, and, you know, the colour really does enhance it, especially, as I said, Skara, with the reds of the city and the blues of the interior. It really does help it. So now that we've discussed the animation, now let's talk about the actual story itself. So, Evil of the Daleks is, in my opinion, an absolute classic, and it's now that I've got into the groove of reviewing episodes with like stuff like the podcasts and that I've done since the other missing episode videos, let's do it like that. So we're going to start off with the Doctor, Patrick Troughton. I love Troughton, he's one of my favourite Doctors if I'm being honest, and he's just so expressive. I mean, the fact that we have the surviving episode 2, it shows that expression, and I've always loved him as the Doctor, and he gets more serious in this episode with how, you know, he's sort of that hatred of the Daleks does come through in this episode, but he still has his fair share of silly comedic moments too. And it's also here where his relationship and his friendship with Jamie, his companion, it kind of gets tested and challenged in that way. Speaking of which, you've got Jamie, one of the best Doctor Who companions ever, and he's brilliant in this story, and he's very proactive. He gets a hell of a lot to do, but because he's being tested to find the human factor for the Daleks, and he gets a lot to do, and I do love that. It's also in this story where we get introduced to Victoria, played by the late Deborah Watling, who I've always liked as a companion. I think she's I like her as a companion, but I think this isn't her best story. She does get better, but it's fairly good for an introduction. But it's the other side characters that really do make the story, specifically Maxtable and Waterfield. So Waterfield, by the way, is Victoria's father. But these two are fantastic characters. They're two scientists who are trying to discover the secret of time travel, and the Daleks end up taking advantage of that, and they're trying to discover the human factor and all that stuff. But these two are brilliant. Even though they're working for the Daleks, they're very different characters. Waterfield very much represents good, as he's only doing it just to save his daughter, and he's a really sympathetic character, and when he dies at the end, you really feel for him. And then you've got Maxtable, who is working for the Daleks and wants to get his own, wants to meet his own ends. He wants to find out how to turn metal to gold, and he's doing it for the greed. And it is very much that good and evil parallel with this. But it's not entirely black and white, Maxtable shows signs of sympathy and emotion, and Waterfield does show signs of aggression, but they're very much meant to represent good and evil. And there's little moments where you pick up on them, and you see the power dynamics between them, and it's so interesting, and it is phenomenally written by David Whittaker. In fact, the whole theme of good and evil is a really interesting theme that I picked up on watching it. It's just a brilliantly well done thing, not just with these two characters, but also with the Daleks. Obviously the Daleks are evil, but when they get the human factor, when some of them do, they become good, and they're childish, they question and they rebel against the Daleks. And it's that theme, it's so richly detailed, and it's absolutely brilliant. Let's talk about the Daleks as well for a moment, because they are fantastically written by David Whittaker. I know they're obviously created by Terry Nation, but David Whittaker really added a more intelligent level to them. They were presented as intelligent aliens, and obviously they do kill a lot of people. Anyone that gets in the way, they kill them. There's various cliffhangers where that happens, and a lot of characters do get killed in this story, but you see their intelligence and how they are experimenting with the whole human factor stuff. And it's such a fantastic layer to the Daleks that I'm glad was in this story. And I believe Power of the Daleks, even though I've not seen that yet. This is also the first story which has the sort of good Dalek premise. Stories like Daleks in Manhattan, Dalek, Into the Dalek Habit. This was the first time that it was kind of done, because as you see at the end of episode 5, beginning of episode 6, the three Daleks, Alpha, Beta and Omega, they're given names, they get the human factor, and become more childish. They're, the Dizzy Dalek line, if you've ever heard that, they're playing games with the Doctor, and it's just so surreal seeing them saying oh, we are friends, and it's so surreal, and just in the best way possible. It's just absolutely brilliantly done, and it is, you've got a good bit of humour there, but it is really interesting. This is also the introduction to the Emperor Dalek, who also reappeared in Bad Wolf Part of the Ways in Series 1. And to be honest, I do prefer him in that Series 1 story, but he's still fantastic in this. He's very menacing, a phenomenal design, booming voice, and he is brilliant. He's got a great presence to him. There's also some other great side characters in this story, like Kennedy and Mr. Perry, who only appear in the first part with the 1960s kind of thing, who are working for Waterfield and don't really know the full picture, and they're really memorable characters, and they do well. Kennedy does get killed off in the end of part 1, and you also have Kemmel, who, despite being a more physically imposing character, has got a good heart through and through, and I really, it was very sad to see him get killed off at the end. I also like the time hopping stuff, which means every episode or every couple of episodes you go to a different location. So in the first episode and a bit of this second episode, you're in present-day London at the time, 1966, where the Faceless Ones, the previous story, left off. You know, it does provide a bit of mystery and a bit of good build-up. Then you've got the stuff in the Victorian house, which is also really good. Maybe is the weakest part, but it's still great, I think. And then in the final 2 episodes, you get to go to Skaro, which is it looks phenomenal, I think, and I love it. Even the length of 7 episodes, it didn't put me off. You know, I get why some people say it is a bit too long, but if I'm honest, I wasn't really bored watching the story. And episode 7 itself, the final episode of this, the final end, as they say, is one of the best individual episodes of Doctor Who ever. The emotion of when the characters get killed, there's quite a few character deaths, the Dalek Civil War stuff that happens, all of the different characters meeting their fates, and it's quite dark, and Troughton's delivery of the final end, it's just brilliant. And I mean, in my opinion, oh man, I adore it. So overall, I'll just get a couple of the negatives out of the way. The only real one I had was there was a couple of plot details, like at the end, the human factor is the Dalek factor from episode 6. That did confuse me a bit, but other than that, I adored this story. I adored the animation, and yeah, I'm going to say it, I'll give it a 10, because I loved this story, and I'm so glad that it didn't disappoint me. And, you know, I was getting ever more nervous as I was seeing a few other, you know, in recent times, people saying it's not as good as it is. In my opinion, I think it lives up to its reputation. So that's my review of the story. What do you guys think? What do you like about it? Do you like the story? Do you like the animation? Do you not? Let me know all of that in the comments below. Be sure to like and subscribe. Click the little bell so you don't miss a thing. And this is Clack of the Geek, signing out. Ta-ta.